Before the first light of day, an ordinary Roman citizen had already touched the empire without ever seeing the emperor. He felt it beneath his feet on the Via Appia, begun in 312 BCE under Appius Claudius Caecus, where distance ceased to be something vague and became something that could be measured, calculated, and governed. Along those great arteries, the cursus publicus, with relay stations set at practical intervals, carried orders faster than rumor, binding distant provinces to the rhythm of the center. In the Forum, the law of the 12 tables 451 to 450 BCE placed the law before the eyes of the people, so that justice would not remain only in the memory of a privileged few. And when the Julian reform reset the rhythm of the year, Rome did not merely govern land. Rome learned to govern time as well. If this opening cadence has brought Rome a little closer to you, I invite you to continue with us in the next part. From the road beneath his feet, the Roman looks up and sees another form of order, water. In Rome, water was not merely a gift of nature. It was the result of surveying, gradients, materials, and maintenance. Aqueducts carried water into the city, with some lines drawing from as far as about 92 kilometers away. And what is worth remembering is that most of this system did not display itself in grand stone arches, but ran quietly underground through stone channels and terracotta pipes. In daily life, that meant baths, fountains, and kitchens sharing a steady rhythm of water. Yet the Romans also understood that civilization was not only about bringing clean water in, it was also about carrying dirty water out. The Cloaca Maxima, first an ancient drainage channel and later vaulted, shows how Rome organized both the dazzling and the hidden sides of urban life. Once water flowed in an orderly way, people demanded the next thing. Disputes must have a path to resolution. A Roman citizen entered legal life not only through belief, but through ritual, formula, and predefined authority. The law of the 12 tables, traditionally dated to 451 to 450 BCE, was a turning point because the law was written down and placed in public view so that citizens might know their limits. But Rome's strength did not lie in a single text. It also lay in procedure. In the early period, a lawsuit was divided into highly formal stages, a preliminary phase before the competent magistrate, and then a phase of evidence before a judge. A small error in a prescribed formula of speech could cost a case. Rome taught its people to obey the law, and also taught them how to walk within the law. From the law courts, we come to a quieter, yet more encompassing form of power, time. For the ordinary Roman, harvest seasons, debt payments, festivals, and public obligations all depended on the calendar. When Julius Caesar reformed the calendar, he did not merely revise a table of dates. He reset the operating rhythm of society. Britannica notes that in the 40s BCE, the Roman civil calendar had drifted by about 3 months from the solar year. The Julian reform, with a year of 365 and a quarter days and a leap year every 4 years, brought civil time back into closer alignment with the cycle of nature. To an ordinary citizen, this was not an abstract innovation. It meant appointments drifting less from the seasons, taxes becoming less confused, and rituals falling less out of place. A durable empire depends, in part, on people living within a trustworthy annual rhythm. Once time had been set back in order, the movement of people and commands had to follow the same discipline. The Roman road network did not serve armies alone. It shaped how ordinary people imagined distance. From Italy to the provinces, Rome's paved roads reached far, and it was precisely their straight lines, firm foundations, and well-drained surfaces that made travel, transport, and governance more predictable. Along these arteries, the cursus publicus functioned like the nervous system of the state. Relay stations placed at practical intervals allowed official messages to continue onward, changing horses, stopping for the night, and moving again. Ordinary people might never enter that machinery directly, yet they lived in its shadow. Prices, news of war, and the rhythm of officials all bore the mark of an empire that knew how to organize movement. From roads so rigorously ordered, we can understand why Rome required an army even more disciplined still. The legion was not merely a fighting force. It was also a military system that helped Rome conquer and govern the ancient world. What made that system formidable was not only numbers, but coordination, small units moving like one body, under carefully drilled command, with signals and standards keeping the ranks from dissolving. In the visual memory of later generations, the testudo, the tortoise of interlocked shields, captures that spirit completely. The individual draws inward so the collective may advance. For civilians living near camps or frontier zones, legionary discipline did not appear only on the battlefield. It appeared in guard rotations, granaries, and transport roads, as a constant reminder of public order. Yet an army so finely organized could not only know how to attack, it also had to know how to heal. Here Rome left a distinct mark. A wounded soldier was not entirely abandoned to fate. Britannica notes that the Roman military had medical officers and hospitals. One excavated hospital near Dusseldorf is striking for its modern design. At the same time, the Latin medical tradition through Celsus shows a clear practical spirit, an emphasis on cleanliness, washing wounds with vinegar, and describing surgical procedures. The Roman surgical instruments preserved in archaeology, forceps, knives, probes, show that this was not a medicine of prayer alone. For families with someone in service, that is a deeply human fact. The empire did not merely demand the body's service. It also sought ways to return that body to the ranks. From the camp and infirmary, we step into the house, the bath, and the public spaces where Romans experienced technology as a form of comfort. The hypocaust heating system, an underfloor cavity carrying hot air from a furnace, shows that Rome did not treat warmth as a random blessing, but as something that could be distributed. Romans used it for warm and hot rooms in bathhouses, and in many private homes in the northern provinces. Yet beneath that sense of warmth lay a revolution in materials. From pozzolana mined around the Vesuvius region, mixed with lime to create a natural cement, and then developed into opus cementitium, the Romans produced concrete strong and flexible enough to be poured, to raise arches, support domes, and expand interior space. Arches and concrete thus directly transformed lived experience. Larger rooms, more efficient baths, and more durable buildings. When he leaves that warm interior and enters the marketplace, the Roman encounters another form of technology, metal standardized into trust. Greco-Roman metallurgy, especially ironworking and furnace control, did not merely produce plowshares, nails, knives, or weapons. It created the material foundation of a vast economy. In monetary life, Rome's system of bronze, silver, and gold made exchange less dependent on weighing everything on the spot. Britannica notes that the aureus was the basic gold unit of the Roman world and was reckoned against the silver denarius. The denarius itself was tied to weight standards, showing that coinage was not only a political symbol, but also a technical unit. For ordinary people, a coin bearing the emperor's portrait passing through the hand carried not only symbolic authority, it carried a promise of value that could be stored and sent far away. And so, on the dining table, in the kitchen corner, on the shelves of the market, the empire appeared not through standards or decrees, but through objects. The art of glassblowing. Britannica notes that it was developed by Syrian craftsmen in the 1st century BCE and spread across Roman markets, turned glass from a rare material into something more widely present in daily life, from ordinary containers to luxury wares. Alongside this, the empire's pottery industry reveals remarkable productive capacity. Glossy red aretine ware, mold-made and decorated with stamped designs to create terra sigillata, organized in factory-line fashion at Arretium and exported widely. When an ordinary Roman citizen held a jar, cup, or terracotta lamp, he was holding an entire network of knowledge, clay, kilns, molds, skill, trade routes, and taste. If you wish, we can continue into the deeper layers of that everyday world. From the jars and cups on the market shelves, the story returns to the place where people sleep, eat, grow old, and raise children, the home. Rome did not consist only of the domus of the prosperous, with its atrium, courtyard, and layered rhythm of life. The city also had insulae, multi-story housing blocks for laborers and tradespeople, where the sound of footsteps, wooden doors, and kitchen fires from neighboring families seemed almost to touch through the walls. That contrast was not merely a difference in wealth. It was the coexistence of two distinct sensations of life within one city. Yet whether in a domus or an insula, Romans walked the same road network, went to the same markets, used the same public baths, and lived under the same festival calendar. The empire, therefore, first appeared not as a map of conquests, but as the way a city arranged human beings within space and daily rhythm. As people lived more densely, layer upon layer, their anxieties changed shape as well. In Rome, danger did not come only from distant frontiers, but also from a small flame in the night. For that reason, urban order needed eyes that stayed awake late. The city was divided into districts and neighborhoods. After the Great Fire disaster in the early Augustan age, the vigiles were organized for night patrol and firefighting. Imagine this through the senses of an ordinary household. When the city sank into darkness, there were still patrol footsteps, warning cries, men carrying water, ladders, and tools running towards smoke. Power here did not need to appear in ceremonial dress. It appeared as timely presence. And this is a deeply Roman trait. They did not merely build great structures. They built mechanisms to keep the night from undoing the labor of the day. From the fear of fire, the Roman turns back to an even more fundamental fear, hunger. A great city cannot remain calm if grain ships arrive weeks late. For that reason, the calm of Rome's public squares in fact began at the ports, storehouses, and transport routes that most residents never saw with their own eyes. Ostia and later Portus were not merely unloading points. They were where maritime engineering, logistics, and politics met. When harbor basins were expanded and storage facilities better organized, the city received more than bread. It received time, a margin of safety against panic after a storm or a poor sailing season. For an ordinary person, the empire on such a day might simply mean that goods were still available in the market, prices had not surged, and the evening meal had not yet been cut short. Yet food arriving at the docks was not enough. It had to pass through the market without dissolving into suspicion. Here, a rarely celebrated technology began its work. The technology of standards. Weight, volume, units of measure, and coinage allowed Romans to bargain on common ground. The seller might speak in one tone, the buyer might doubt, but the scale and the measure created a shared point of reference that made disputes less obscure. In these repeated motions, measuring, weighing, recording, paying, we see Rome turning exchange into an act that could be controlled. A society that can be measured is easier to tax, easier to judge, and easier to stabilize through everyday trust. Thus, the power of the empire did not reside only in the forum or the camp. It stood for a long time upon the wooden counter where two strangers bent over a common standard. From the market scale, we move to another kind of weighing, more subtle still, weighing human beings into records. In Rome, the census was not merely administrative. It was the way the state saw society as data, property classes, and obligations. When citizens were registered, property classified, and lists reviewed at regular intervals, order no longer depended entirely on neighborhood memory or the word of acquaintances. It was bound to documentation. This produced a profound psychological change. A Roman was not merely someone in the district, he was also an entry with a place in a system of rights and responsibilities. Taxes, military duty, civic status, family honor, all began to attach themselves to being recorded in the proper place. Rome held its empire by legions, but also by the art of counting people. Once counted and assigned to obligation, the Romans sought a place that softened differences, if only for a while, the public bath. The thermae were not simply places to wash, they were an architecture of rhythm. One moved from cold to warm, from warm to hot, and then back again, as though the body were being guided through an urban ritual whose path everyone understood. On the surface there was water, stone, light, and conversation. Beneath it were furnaces, heat channels, attendance, maintenance schedules, and the discipline of spatial organization. This combination created an elegant illusion, technology at work so that human beings could feel at ease. For the Roman citizen, the bath was a quiet lesson in empire. Civilization is a complex system running so smoothly that we forget it is there. Yet if we stand still in the warm room, we can hear what Rome did better than many civilizations. It turned fire into infrastructure. The hypocaust was not merely a heating trick. It was a system for distributing heat through cavities beneath floors and within walls, allowing hot air to move along design paths rather than dissipate blindly. That sensation of warmth was a result of calculation, materials, and constant labor. From there, we look toward Roman concrete and the architecture of the arch. When the Romans perfected mortar and concrete flexible enough to be poured, they did not merely build larger structures. They changed how living space itself was organized. Arches opened wider spans, concrete held mass securely, and interiors became deeper and more stable. Technology left the workshop and entered the warmth, resonance, and sense of safety of the room. From the warm bath and the firm vault, the story returns to the workshop, where the empire was sustained by precise repetition. The spread of glassblowing in the Roman world did not merely create beautiful objects, it changed how common containers, vessels, and decorative items became in daily life, which is to say, it changed habits of seeing and using things. Pottery did the same. When production organized molds, kilns, labor, and the rhythm of goods at scale, the same type of cup or jar could appear in distant provinces, as if daily life were tied together by a shared material language. For ordinary people, this was unity made tangible, to pick up an object and recognize that it belonged to the same world of exchange. Rome did not need to speak endlessly about cohesion. It allowed objects to repeat that message on the table, in the kitchen, and in the marketplace. Yet behind the clay cup and the glass vessel stood something heavier and more decisive, metal. Mining and metallurgy gave Rome not only weapons, but also nails, hinges, knives, plowshares, carpentry tools, and building tools, small details that kept a city from coming apart. When ore processing techniques were well organized, the empire could sustain both war and civilian life from the same material foundation. Coinage was the clearest point of convergence. The coin in a Roman's hand was both metal of measurable weight and a promise guaranteed by authority. It moved through markets, soldiers' pay, taxes, debts, dowries, and wills. Thus, when coinage was stable, trust traveled faster than ships. And when money trembled, even someone who had never set foot in the forum could feel the empire losing its rhythm in a kitchen at home. From metal and coinage, we come to a material even more durable in public life, writing. The ordinary Roman may not have read every document, yet he lived under the shadow of a society that bound obligation to the written word. Contracts, receipts, tax registers, posted notices, legal petitions. For that reason, the Law of the 12 Tables was far more than an ancient text. It marked the moment when justice was drawn out of the exclusive memory of a minority and placed into public space. From there, Rome developed a legal culture in which procedure, formula, and authority became the skeleton of civic life. The Romans understood very early, power that can be written can be repeated, transmitted, and examined. And when writing became infrastructure, the empire no longer ruled only through people, it ruled through patterns. Even so, writing does not by itself turn justice into reality. It only opens the first door. Behind that door lies an entire art of following the proper procedure. In Rome, litigation was not merely a matter of saying one had been wronged. It meant stepping onto a legal stage where timing, authority, wording, and evidence all had to follow a prescribed order. Use the wrong formula, take the wrong step, approach the wrong official, and a case could collapse at the threshold. It sounds cold, yet that very coldness created durability. Romans gradually learned that justice was not a surge of moral feeling, but a road with rails, narrow, rigid, sometimes uncomfortable, yet able to keep disputes from spilling into private vengeance. The state did not promise to erase every injustice. It promised a path by which injustice could be brought into a framework of judgment. From the law court, we move to the place where Rome forged the same lesson in the sound of metal striking shield, the camp. Not everyone wore armor, but nearly everyone lived in the shadow of the legions, through military roads, taxes, granaries, recruitment, and frontier news. What made the Roman legion distinctive was not only force, but coordinated discipline. Men learned to move as one body, hold formation, change formation, and accept common signals in place of individual instinct. The testudo, with shields locked into a tortoiseshell form, was therefore more than a battlefield technique. It was the emblem of an organizational culture. For ordinary people, legionary discipline brought two feelings at once: reassurance that the frontiers were held, and the knowledge that the empire endured because bodies consented to live under the rhythm of command. Yet the army truly entered civilian life only when the soldier left the ranks. Rome understood this and made demobilization part of the architecture of power. Veterans were settled in coloniae not only as a reward for service. The policy also planted nuclei that carried Roman law, language, discipline, and urban habits into newly controlled regions. For the soldier, this was life after campaign: a plot of land, a roof, a confirmed civic standing. For the land that received him, it meant the arrival of a community that knew how to lay out streets, manage property, settle disputes, and live by Rome's calendar of obligations. The empire expanded not only through armies on the march, it also expanded through men who had laid down the spear but still carried the system in their minds. From the veteran settlement, we enter a space softer in form but more durable in effect: habits of belief. Roman religion in everyday life was not separate from governance. It was woven into the calendar, the family, public obligation, and the idea of order itself. Romans did not only believe in the gods inwardly, they also maintained a ritual discipline, as though the worlds of gods and men were sustained by actions performed at the proper time and in the proper way. In each home, a small shrine, simple offerings, and familiar prayers tied the household meal and the family's protection into a shared sacred frame. This matters more than it may seem. For when a community repeats familiar rites across generations, it preserves not only memory, but rhythm. And any empire that preserves that rhythm will endure far deeper than what is carved upon stone columns. Precisely because Rome understood the power of shared rhythm, it both tolerated many rites and grew wary when that rhythm seemed bent out of shape. Ancient festivals such as Lupercalia endured not only because of sacred meaning, but because the whole city knew the day, awaited the season, and reread its collective memory through the rite. There, the city became a shared emotional calendar, where body, fortune, and fertility were tied to public time. Yet the Bacchanalia revealed a very clear limit. When a religious activity was judged to have moved beyond the frame of control, in scale, frequency, or organizational structure, the Senate could intervene forcefully. Rome accepted diversity, but not a closed form of gathering whose inner rhythm public authority could no longer see. Roman order governed not only roads and water, it governed the capacity to assemble. From ritual, we moved to another place that gathered crowds, yet openly channeled and designed down to each entrance: entertainment buildings. The Circus Maximus and the amphitheater were not merely venues. They were tests of mass organization on a scale many modern cities would respect. Seating, exits, social stratification of spectators, movement flow, shade, water supply, order keeping. Everything had to work together so that tens of thousands could be present without dissolving into chaos. Romans came to watch races, performances, to cheer, to forget fatigue. Yet they were also being taught a quiet lesson: the joy of the crowd endures only when supported by technique beneath it. Even Rome's loudest moments rested on the same principle: design in advance, operate precisely, maintain consistently. Yet the places where order appeared most clearly also exposed its deepest fault lines. Not every Roman lived with the same level of safety or comfort. Some entered the baths as a refined habit. Others relied on them because public infrastructure compensated for private lack. Some used the law as an instrument to protect property. Others used it simply in hope of not losing what little they had. Rome did not erase inequality. Rome managed it. This point must be faced directly. The empire's strength did not lie in a promise of perfect fairness, but in its ability to build systems visible enough for society to keep functioning amid disparity. People knew where they stood, which road to take, when they would be heard, and who had authority to act. It was a form of stability both admirable and fragile. And all of it depended on what is rarely praised: maintenance. Roads do not mend themselves after rain. Aqueducts do not preserve their gradient on their own. Sewers do not clean themselves. Baths do not heat themselves. Records do not update themselves. Currency does not preserve trust by itself. The more sophisticated an empire becomes, the more it requires countless anonymous hands to keep ordinary things moving in rhythm. While the machinery remains strong, citizens almost forget how many layers of labor and administration are carrying them. But history is severe on this point. Decline usually begins not with dramatic spectacle, but with small delays, small failures, small exceptions, until those exceptions slowly become the rule. By the time people must fend for themselves in matters once guaranteed by the system, part of the empire has already withdrawn from their lives. Therefore, if we wish to understand a human being inside the Roman system, we should ask not only what class he belonged to or which god he worshipped. We must ask, what did he still trust would function tomorrow morning? He trusted the water would arrive. He trusted the market would open. He trusted the road could still be traveled. He trusted the coin would still be accepted. He trusted that when night fell, someone would patrol. He trusted that disputes, however difficult, still had a place to be brought into a framework of judgment. That chain of expectations created the deepest feeling of empire, not symbol, but reliable habit. And it is precisely here that historical tragedy begins to take root. For when a society has grown accustomed to order, it easily mistakes familiarity for permanence. People still go to market, still bathe, still pay, still litigate, while the joints beneath have already begun to loosen. That is why Roman ruins send a deeper chill through the spine than Roman victories. A cracked arch, a dry sewer, a silent harbor, a cooling bathhouse. Each is evidence that a civilization may preserve its outer form while its inner substance is changing color. An empire does not always collapse in a single blow. Often it decays like music whose melody remains while the instruments begin to slip out of tune. The calendar still runs, the laws are still read, taxes are still collected, the buildings are still standing. Yet trust, justice, and the capacity for maintenance no longer move in the same rhythm. And when those three things come apart, ordinary people are the first to hear the crack, yet the least able to change its direction. If you wish, in the next part we will step into that moment when Rome still appeared powerful, yet had already begun to fracture from within.